The emergency alarm wailed at 3:17 a.m. My cabin door rattled with urgent knocking. A trembling steward stood outside. "Mrs. Moreno, please come with me. There's been an incident." Lifeboat spotlights carved through darkness as rain pelted the churning ocean. Fellow passengers lined the promenade deck in bathrobes and pajamas. I pushed through them, heart hammering, searching for Cassie among the confused faces. "A passenger went overboard approximately 90 minutes ago," the captain announced over the loudspeaker. "Search and rescue protocols have been initiated." The words floated past me. 90 minutes. Cassie wasn't answering her cabin phone. She wasn't in the lounge where evacuated passengers huddled. She wasn't anywhere. Hours stretched. Morning light revealed empty ocean. Then the ship's hospitality director guided me to a wood-paneled room where the captain waited, hat removed. "Mrs. Moreno, I regret to inform you." Time fractured. A passenger had heard screaming, then a splash. Crew members spotted a figure in the water. They marked the coordinates. They followed procedure. The conditions. The current. "I'm deeply sorry." I clutched Cassie's student ID in my palm. Her marine biology program acceptance photo, 18 and beaming. "Which part of the ship?" My voice sounded like someone else's. "Starboard upper deck, near cabin section C. The railing. The one with the loose section Cassie mentioned during our dinner together." "Mom, it wobbles when you lean against it. I reported it yesterday." 2 days later, a passenger incident specialist arrived aboard. He escorted me to a conference room where 3 executives waited. Their practiced expressions of sympathy vanished when I mentioned the railing. "Our maintenance logs show no such report," said the silver-haired man at the center. "All safety features on our vessels exceed maritime requirements." "She told your steward. His name was James." "No James served on this voyage, Mrs. Moreno." The woman beside him slid a folder toward me. "We understand nothing can bring your daughter back, but please accept this as our deepest expression of regret." Inside, vouchers for 10 complimentary cruises, a Diamond Elite loyalty status upgrade, 30% lifetime discount card, an onboard credit certificate for $5,000. "You're offering me free trips after my daughter fell from your ship?" "Sometimes returning to the sea can be healing," the woman suggested. "Many guests find comfort in our tranquil ocean voyages. Just sign here acknowledging receipt of our goodwill package." I signed while staring at their nameplates. Victor, Harriet, Dean. That night, alone in my cabin, I dialed the customer service number and booked my first cruise. Same ship, same route, Cassie's exact cabin. I hung up, then immediately called back to book the next sailing, and the next. By sunrise, I'd reserved 47 consecutive voyages, spanning 6 months. I cashed out my retirement account the following morning. When I finally disembarked, I didn't go home. I checked into a hotel near the port and waited 5 days until boarding again. The same steward who'd processed my previous checkout looked startled when I appeared with luggage. "Welcome back aboard, Mrs. Moreno." I smiled. "I'll be staying in cabin C 217. "But that's the same cabin as before." "Yes, my daughter loved that room." If you've ever lost someone suddenly, you know how grief wraps around your throat like invisible hands. You might understand what I did next. If you do, please tap that like button, because what follows is the story of how a middle-aged high school English teacher with arthritis in both knees systematically dismantled a multi-billion-dollar cruise company. Subscribe now, because I promise you'll want to hear how this ends. My name is Elena Moreno. My daughter Cassie was studying to become a marine biologist when she fell through a faulty railing on her first research cruise, a graduation present I'd saved 3 years to afford. I taught English literature to teenagers for 26 years. I graded papers, directed school plays, and chaperoned proms. I'd never broken a rule more serious than returning library books late. Before Cassie died, I believed in systems, in proper channels, in filling out forms and waiting for responses. That version of me drowned the night Cassie fell. On my second cruise, I brought photos of Cassie. I placed them around the cabin, arranged her favorite books on the nightstand. I walked the same route she would have taken that final night, from the dining room to the upper deck, then to the exact section of railing. It was still loose. 3 maintenance workers passed me as I stood there. Each avoided my gaze. By my 5th cruise, crew members began whispering when I appeared. By my 8th, passengers were pointing me out in dining areas. "That's her, the woman whose daughter fell." I began eating at Cassie's favorite table each night. Always alone, always with her photo facing outward. Passengers would approach, ask questions. I showed them pictures of Cassie as a child collecting seashells, Cassie at 17 winning her science fair with a project on ocean acidification, Cassie beaming in her university sweatshirt. She loved the ocean her whole life, I'd tell them. This was her dream voyage. Then I'd mention casually how she'd reported the loose railing, how no one fixed it. On my 12th voyage, an elderly couple invited me to join them for dinner. The husband, a retired construction inspector, asked detailed questions about the railing. The next day, I spotted him examining it himself, taking notes. By cruise 15, a pattern emerged. Return passengers would seek me out, ask after my well-being. New passengers would hear my story from others. Crew members no longer avoided me. Instead, they began stopping by with small gestures, an extra dessert, fresh flowers in Cassie's cabin, a window table saved without asking. On voyage 23, a steward named Alicia knocked on my door after midnight. "Mrs. Moreno? I shouldn't be speaking to you, but—" Her hands trembled. "I was working the night your daughter. I heard her call the maintenance line about that railing. I heard it myself. I invited her in. Did you tell anyone?" Management said there was no record. They suggested I was mistaken. She glanced nervously down the corridor. Others heard it too. We were told discussing it violates our employment agreements. Similar conversations followed on subsequent cruises. A bartender who'd served Cassie that evening. A gift shop clerk who'd heard the maintenance team joking about the list of fixes that never get fixed. A security officer who admitted footage from that night had been routinely overwritten. I never asked them to break rules. I simply listened, remembered, and thanked them. On voyage 34, I noticed something. Crew members had established unofficial safety protocols. They were quietly checking railings before each sailing, leaving maintenance doors unlocked during passenger hours, passing safety information directly to guests instead of through official channels. It was then I realized what was happening. My presence, this grieving mother who refused to disappear, was changing the ship itself. The company believed grief would silence me. They never expected I'd become part of their fleet, a living reminder sailing with them week after week. By voyage 39, passengers were booking specifically to meet me, the mother who never left. They called me online. Some brought mementos of their own lost loved ones. Others, engineers, safety inspectors, maritime attorneys, asked pointed questions about Cassie's fall. On voyage 42, 2 travel journalists boarded. They asked to photograph my daily vigil at the railing. Their article went viral before we reached port. Voyage 43 brought the first executive on board, a vice president of operations who watched with increasing agitation as passengers greeted me by name in hallways and crew members subtly acknowledged me with nods. He requested a meeting. "These vouchers weren't intended for consecutive use, Mrs. Moreno." "The terms don't specify that," I replied. "Your bereavement specialist suggested returning to sea might help me heal. Your presence is disrupting operations." "How?" "I follow all passenger guidelines. I'm quiet. I don't make demands. You're turning our guests and staff against us." I adjusted Cassie's photo on the table between us. "I'm simply remembering my daughter in the place she loved most. Isn't that what you suggested I do with your generous vouchers?" His face reddened. "We can offer an alternative settlement if you'll agree to discontinue your voyages." I smiled. "I still have 4 more vouchers to use. I wouldn't dream of wasting your company's generosity." What frightened them most wasn't what I said or did. It was what I remembered. Every conversation, every detail, every name. The English teacher with the perfect memory who sat in their dining room night after night, collecting their failures piece by piece. They never imagined grief could make someone stronger. They never expected a mother with nothing left to lose would become their greatest threat. As I prepared for voyage 44, I understood something they didn't. I wasn't just a passenger anymore. I had become something embedded in their operation, a ghost they couldn't exorcise, a presence they couldn't explain away, a truth they couldn't override with corporate policies. And my plan was only beginning to unfold. By the morning of voyage 44, my cabin door featured fresh flowers with a note, "We remember Cassie too." No signature. The steward who delivered my breakfast avoided eye contact when I asked who sent them. That afternoon, I noticed security personnel following me at a distance. When I approached the section of railing where Cassie fell, a crew member would suddenly appear with cleaning supplies or maintenance tools, blocking access. The captain himself invited me to a private dinner, keeping me occupied during the evening hours when I typically held my vigil. Their tactics were changing. Direct confrontation had failed, so now they attempted distraction and obstruction. They still believed they were facing a grieving mother, seeking closure, not realizing I had become something else entirely. On Voyage 45, Victor, the silver-haired executive who had first offered me the vouchers, boarded with 3 assistants. I watched them gather crew members for closed-door meetings throughout the day. That evening, the captain announced a special maintenance review of the starboard upper deck. The entire area was cordoned off, unavailable to passengers for the duration of the cruise. I simply relocated my vigil to the port side, directly across from where Cassie fell. Passengers found me anyway. Some brought chairs to join me. Others left memorials, flowers, handwritten notes, small stones. By morning, the port side railing had become a makeshift shrine. The executives were furious. I watched them photographing the memorial, ordering crew to dismantle it, arguing with passengers who protested. Harriet, the female executive who had been present when they offered me vouchers, confronted me in the dining room. "This has gone far beyond the bounds of reasonable grieving, Mrs. Moreno," she hissed, leaning across my table where Cassie's photo sat. "You're orchestrating disruption aboard our ship." I looked up from my tea. "I haven't asked anyone to do anything. You've turned our passengers against us. You've compromised our crew loyalty. All I've done is remember my daughter. If that's disruptive to your business, perhaps the problem isn't with me." Her perfectly manicured nails dug into the tablecloth. "We've been more than generous. Those vouchers were meant as a kindness, and I've gratefully used them exactly as offered. We can make things difficult for you." I smiled. More difficult than losing my only child? That night, I found my cabin door wouldn't unlock. After 30 minutes at the guest services desk, they claimed a system error had deactivated my key. When I finally entered, Cassie's photos had been removed, replaced with generic cruise photography. Her books were stacked in a neat pile, moved from their places. I calmly returned everything to its proper position, then placed my chair against the door handle before sleeping. On Voyage 46, they changed tactics again. A young woman approached me at breakfast, Jenna, from Passenger Relations, a department I'd never heard of before. "We want to understand how to better serve you, Mrs. Moreno," she said with practiced warmth. "Perhaps we could create a proper memorial for Cassandra? A plaque, perhaps? Or a scholarship in her name?" "That's very thoughtful," I replied, "but I'm fine with my current arrangements. We could name a youth science program after her, Cassandra's Ocean Explorers? With your input, of course." Their desperation was showing. They'd moved from dismissal to confrontation to bribery, each approach revealing how deeply my presence threatened them. That night, 7 crew members who had spoken to me on previous voyages were absent from their posts. When I asked about James, the bartender who had served Cassie, a nervous replacement told me he'd been reassigned to another vessel. Dean, the 3rd executive from that original meeting, cornered me in a quiet corridor. "You need to understand the realities here, Mrs. Moreno. These are international waters. Maritime law is complex." "I'm aware," I replied. "My late husband was a maritime attorney. He'd been a high school chemistry teacher, but Dean blanched anyway." "Then you understand there are limits to what can be proven about accidents at sea." "Is that what keeps you awake at night, Dean? What can be proven?" His expression hardened. "I sleep very well. Do you? Dragging out your grief like this can't be healthy." Actually, I've never had more clarity. By the final day of that voyage, security personnel no longer shadowed me discreetly, they openly flanked me everywhere. Crew members were instructed not to speak to me. My dinner table was relocated to a far corner by the kitchen. My shower ran cold. The air conditioning in my cabin failed. As I disembarked, Victor waited at the gangway. "Your remaining vouchers have been cancelled, Mrs. Moreno, for your own well-being." I handed him my boarding pass for Voyage 47. "I've already checked in for tomorrow." "That's not possible. It is when you pay in cash." His face reddened. "This has gone on long enough." I couldn't agree more. That night, alone in my portside hotel room, I laid out everything I'd gathered over 46 voyages. Names, dates, conversations, patterns. 6 months of watching the same ship, the same crew, the same operations. I organized it all, preparing for my final sailing. They never understood what I was doing. They thought I was making a public spectacle, seeking attention or compensation. They never grasped that my quiet presence had a purpose beyond grief. Voyage 47 began differently. When I boarded, the entire executive team awaited me in a private lounge. Victor, Harriet, Dean, and 5 others I'd never met. "Before you settle in, we'd like to discuss a resolution," Victor said, gesturing to a leather portfolio on the table. A significant settlement that acknowledges your loss and our desire for mutual closure. I sat across from him. I'm listening. $2 million. Immediate transfer. A formal public apology. A memorial scholarship in Cassandra's name at the oceanographic institution of your choice. Harriet slid papers toward me. In exchange for your agreement not to board our vessels again or discuss your experiences publicly. I opened the portfolio, reviewed the terms. Plus immediate implementation of fleet-wide safety upgrades, added Dean hastily, and termination of personnel responsible for any oversights. You've had quite a change of heart, I observed, since there were no reports about the railing and no James working that night. They exchanged glances. Victor cleared his throat. New information has come to our attention. How convenient. Mrs. Moreno. Harriet leaned forward. This is an opportunity to honor your daughter while finding peace. Isn't that what you've wanted? I closed the portfolio. You think I've been sailing with you for 6 months to pressure you into a settlement, haven't you? If I'd wanted money, I would have hired a lawyer on day one. I would have given interviews to the press. I would have filed lawsuits. Then what have you been doing? Victor demanded. I stood, smoothing my skirt, keeping a promise to my daughter, and I'm not finished yet. Their confusion was palpable. They still didn't understand. They believed grief made me weak, made me malleable. They never considered it might make me unstoppable. As I left the room, Dean called after me. We can make you leave this ship before we sail. I turned back. You won't. Why not? Because you still don't know what I've been doing for 46 voyages, and that terrifies you more than my presence ever could. The truth was, they couldn't risk forcing me off publicly now. Too many passengers knew me, too many crew members watched, too many people would ask questions about the mother who sailed 46 times only to be removed on her 47th voyage. So they let me board, thinking they could contain whatever damage I might cause for one final week. They believed their power, their money, their lawyers, their authority on their own ship made them untouchable. They had no idea what I'd set in motion. As the ship pulled away from port, I stood at the railing where Cassie had fallen, watching the horizon. For the first time in 6 months, I felt her presence without pain. She had loved the ocean with all its power and mysteries. She had trusted its vastness to hold her dreams. The ocean had taken her from me, and now it would give me justice. In my cabin that night, I opened the small wooden box I'd carried on every voyage, the one containing Cassie's treasured collection of seashells gathered from shores around the world. Beneath them lay my final preparations. I remembered Victor's words from our first meeting. No reports exist in our maintenance logs. He had been right about one thing. Evidence can disappear. Reports can be deleted. Witnesses can be silenced. But some things cannot be erased, no matter how powerful you are. Tomorrow, the world would understand exactly what I'd been doing on these 47 voyages. The executives would discover why a grieving mother's quiet persistence had frightened them more than any lawsuit ever could. Because I hadn't just been remembering Cassie, I had been becoming something else entirely, something they created the moment they decided her life was worth nothing more than discount vouchers and empty apologies. What happens to a woman when she loses everything? When the system meant to protect her instead offers insults disguised as compensation? When powerful men and women look her in the eye and lie about her child's death? She stops playing by their rules. She creates new ones. As night fell on voyage 47, I prepared for the final phase of the promise I'd made to Cassie 6 months earlier, standing over her empty casket. They think they've seen the worst that can happen. They haven't even begun to understand what's coming. Morning broke on voyage 47 with unusual activity. Coast Guard vessels shadowed our ship at a distance. Media helicopters circled overhead. The captain announced routine exercises to explain their presence, but crew members exchanged worried glances. At breakfast, passengers crowded around their phones, reading news alerts. They whispered when I entered the dining room. Some approached my table with quiet congratulations. Others watched in stunned silence as I ate my oatmeal beside Cassie's photo, exactly as I had for 46 mornings before. By mid-morning, Victor and his team were nowhere to be found. The ship's senior officers huddled in tense conversation on the bridge. At noon, the captain announced we would return to port immediately due to operational concerns. Passengers groaned about their shortened vacation. I returned to my cabin and waited. The knock came within the hour. 2 Coast Guard officers and the captain stood outside my door. Mrs. Moreno, we need you to come with us, please. In the captain's private quarters, federal maritime investigators waited alongside serious-faced attorneys. For 3 hours, they asked questions. I answered each one calmly, providing dates, names, locations. They had questions about what I'd witnessed during my unusual extended stay aboard, about the maintenance practices I'd observed, about conversations with crew members spanning 6 months of continuous sailing. "You've been living on this ship for half a year," one investigator noted. "What exactly were you trying to accomplish?" "I was building a community," I replied. By evening, we docked. Media swarmed the port. Passengers disembarked through a gauntlet of cameras and microphones, many stopping to recount their experiences with the mother who never left and what they'd witnessed aboard. As I prepared to leave, Alicia, the steward who had first confirmed Cassie's railing report, appeared at my door. "Mrs. Moreno, we wanted you to have this." She handed me a thumb drive. "It's from all of us." Back in my hotel room, I connected it to my laptop. The file contained hundreds of videos, crew members from every department speaking directly to the camera. Each detailed safety violations they'd witnessed, management directives to ignore protocols, cover-ups following passenger incidents. Many began with the same phrase: "After meeting Mrs. Moreno, I can no longer remain silent." My phone buzzed with messages from other passengers I'd met over 47 voyages, links to social media posts they'd shared about sailing with me, photos of the loose railings I'd quietly pointed out, screenshots of medical reports from minor accidents that echoed circumstances similar to Cassie's fall. For 6 months, while executives thought I was simply a grieving mother making them uncomfortable, I had been becoming something far more dangerous, a catalyst. Each conversation with a crew member, each meal with fellow passengers, each quiet vigil at the railing. I wasn't just collecting evidence, I was creating witnesses, hundreds of them, sailing back to their homes around the world, carrying pieces of Cassie's story and their own observations. I hadn't needed to smuggle out maintenance logs or plant hidden devices. I had done something far more devastating. I had changed how people saw the company from within. Cruise ships operate on reputation, on trust, on the promise of safety and care. With each voyage, each conversation, each quiet moment standing at the spot where my daughter died, I had systematically dismantled that trust among the very people the company needed most, their own staff and loyal customers. My lawyer called. "Elena, turn on the news." The company's stock had plummeted 43% in a single day. 4 senior executives had been placed on administrative leave pending federal investigation. Current and former crew members were coming forward by the hundreds, describing a culture of negligence and cover-ups spanning years. Major cruise booking platforms suspended the company's listings. Class action lawsuits were being organized in 8 countries. Maritime authorities in 3 nations had detained their vessels for emergency safety inspections, all triggered not by my accusations, but by their own people finally speaking up. When my doorbell rang at midnight, I wasn't surprised to see Victor standing there. His tailored suit was rumpled, his silver hair disheveled. "You planned this from the beginning," he said hoarsely. "Every voyage, every conversation, creating this network of people against us." "I didn't turn anyone against you," I replied. "I simply gave them space to see what was already there. You could have taken our settlement. This was never about money." His hands shook. "What do you want now?" I showed him my phone, an email confirmation for a reservation. One final voyage, 6 months from today, aboard their flagship vessel, the same one where Cassie had died. I'll be sailing again to mark the 1-year anniversary of my daughter's death. By then, I expect every safety issue will be fixed. Every negligent executive will be removed. Every policy that valued profit over human life will be rewritten. "The company may not survive that long," he whispered. "Then Cassie's death will have meant something." As he turned to leave, I added, "I'll be checking that railing personally, Victor. I've taught hundreds of teenagers over my career. I know when someone has completed their assignment properly." He paused. "How did you do it?" "We monitored everything. Your calls, your emails, your interactions. You were looking for evidence I was stealing, when I was actually giving something back. Dignity to your crew, caution to your passengers, meaning to my daughter's death." I closed the door. "You should have fixed that railing the first time it was reported." 3 days later, the company announced a complete leadership overhaul and fleet-wide safety modernization. 6 executives resigned. Mandatory reporting protocols were instituted for maintenance issues. An independent safety board was established with oversight authority. And on every ship in their fleet, permanent memorials were installed, in memory of Cassandra Moreno and all passengers lost at sea, because one is too many. 1 year later, I boarded their flagship vessel as promised. The new CEO greeted me personally, along with family members of other passengers lost at sea over the decades. Many crew members from my previous voyages had been promoted to safety oversight positions. Alicia was now head of passenger relations. Together, we sailed to the coordinates where Cassie had fallen. In a simple ceremony, we released biodegradable lanterns into the night sky. As they floated upward, the ship's new captain made an announcement heard on every vessel in their fleet, now required at the start of each voyage. Safety is not a guideline, it is our most sacred promise to everyone aboard. I stood at the newly reinforced railing, watching the lanterns disappear into darkness. For the first time since losing Cassie, I felt something besides grief. Not closure, I'd never have that, but purpose. Meaning. The knowledge that my daughter's death had saved others from the same fate. I never raised my voice. Never filed a lawsuit. Never made threats or demands. I simply refused to disappear when it was convenient for them. I transformed from a grieving mother they could dismiss into a constant reminder they couldn't escape, of promises broken, of lives carelessly lost, of the cost of their negligence. They never understood that by giving me those vouchers, they had handed me the key to their kingdom. They had invited the one person who had nothing left to lose to witness every aspect of their operation. They had underestimated what grief can transform a person into, not someone broken, but someone unbounded by conventional limitations. What makes a woman dangerous isn't anger or vengeance, it's patience, persistence, the willingness to rebuild herself around a singular purpose. If you've stayed with me through this journey, you understand something crucial about loss. It doesn't always destroy you. Sometimes it reconstructs you into something powerful. If this story of a mother's determination to honor her child resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that grief can become a force for change. Subscribe to hear more stories of ordinary people finding extraordinary strength in their darkest moments. Because the most important lesson I learned aboard those 47 voyages wasn't about revenge, it was about transformation, about how quickly the world changes when just one person refuses to look away.